today to our mental health and the current climate virtual boardroom, which has been facilitated by HR Recruits and Helen Bailey and Emily Morley. My name is Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruits. I'm joined today by Helen and Emily from Strategy Solutions, and they will introduce themselves shortly. They're going to share their knowledge and experience about the current reality of mental health in the UK and provide support options from both within and outside of organisations. If you've got any burning questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility. There is a lot of content to go through, so we have allowed some time at the end for a Q&A. I'm now going to hand you over to Helen and Emily, who will introduce themselves and start the boardroom. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jo, and thank you for having us. So I'm Helen Bailey. I'm the head of L&D here at Strategy Solutions, and I'll let Emily introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emily Morley, and I also work at Strategy Solutions as a HR consultant.
And so what we want to do today is really talk about mental health, but talk about it in the current climate. And I do think there is something very pertinent about the current climate when we talk about mental health. There are lots of things going on, and we're going to talk about some of those later on in the session. But just in case you've not encountered us before, this is who Strategy are. So we often describe ourselves a bit like the Avengers, and that's not because we dress up at weekends or anything. It's more to do with the fact that we all have a passion for what we do. We're experts in our field, and we support businesses to be the best that we can be. So if you wanted to think about what our three main strands are, they're marketing, people, and creative, and they all come together in that culture piece. So if we talk about marketing, things like social media, traditional marketing, digital marketing, copywriting, PR, the creative is the brand. You'll be noticing I've got my lovely stripes behind me. Interior design, and then we've got all the people stuff, which is where Emily and I come in. So things like health and safety, recruitment, culture change, and of course, I always finish up with amazing L&D. Sorry, Emily, I had to get my plug in there for that one. So in terms of our learning, and just wanted to touch on a couple of things here about our learning and how we kind of go about things. Some of the things that we really focus on is making it exciting, making it a little bit different, a little bit quirky, because that's who we are. Also, it's about stories. I'm really interested in people's stories and their lived experience, and also something that makes a difference. You may have been to one of my earlier HR recruit sessions, which was about evidence-based L&D, which is one of my passions. And there you have me in our office in my what I call my training cardi, because very often I have the same thing on over and over again. But luckily today I've remembered to wear something different. So let's talk about mental health. So really what I wanted to talk about today is to talk about where are we at really in terms of key statistics, talk about the misconception of what living with poor mental health looks like in practice, what are the things that really impact on mental health, and having a conversation. I really want to be quite upfront really about this. I think having a conversation about how to have that conversation is a really useful thing to do. And then we'll talk about some potential areas of support. So let's start with quite a big question, which is, what is mental health? So what I'd like you to do, if you can go onto www.menti.com and put that code in and give me your thoughts on what you think mental health is. So this is the bit where I get to drink my tea while you do this. So it can be words, it can be phrases, but what do you think mental health is? Okay. Oh, I like that one. Everything that's going on in my brain, good and bad, and everything in between. Yeah. State of an individual's mental well-being. I'm guessing it's mental rather than mental. Someone who's struggling personally, well-being, state of mind, how someone is feeling, emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Oh, interesting. A person's state of mind at that time. I think that's interesting because it's not always a constant. Sometimes it will be more up than down. Any more for any more? Some good ones to get us started, though, in terms of where we're at. I think there is a lot talked about mental health in the workplace and really identifying what it is and how that works. Oh, that one's just gone a bit down. I'm just scroll down a bit. There we go. Different levels of mental well-being, emotional well-being, psychological and emotional. Having clarity of mind, being positive, motivated, can-do, and being aware of what may be bringing us down. And that self-awareness, actually, in the grip of mental ill health is not always possible. It's really hard sometimes to see the woods for the trees and everything that influences and affects my thinking. Okay, so let's have a look at a couple of definitions. Oops. Hopefully that will flip back on. I do love a Menti, but it does mess with my slides sometimes. There we go. So in terms of a mental health definition, and this is from the World Health Organization, we talk about where each individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life. So I think we're talking there not about the extremes, can work productively and fruitfully and is able to make a contribution to their community. So really here, just to make a point that everybody has mental health. Okay, the difference is that some people have poor mental health, and that's kind of my next definition. So when we talk about poor mental health, what we're talking about, this is where our mental health is not where we would like it to be. So we find it difficult to manage how we think, feel, act with respect to daily stresses. Sometimes one of the signs that all is not well with us in terms of mental health is that we are finding it much harder to think. That feels like a much longer process. Everything feels a little bit more difficult. I was reading something last week and somebody was talking about actually, just making the bed can be a big achievement for somebody with ill mental health. So let's start to have a look at a couple of stats then. So, and this is where Joey's going to be poised in a minute to start a poll for me. So at any one time, 1 in 6 people of the working age population of Britain experience symptoms associated with mental ill health. Absolutely, Susie, just getting out of bed as well. Yeah. Anxiety and depression are the most common disorder in the UK, and 4 to 10% of people in England will experience depression in their lifetime. So that's a sizable chunk of the population. And, one of the things that we would kind of put up front in the objectives here was that how do you recognize that? And it's not always what you think it might look for. So we've got 3 questions I'm just going to get you to have a go at. So Joe, if you could do the first one for me now, please.
Helen, it's not allowing me to
okay.
to do it.
Okay.
That's it.
Should we go to plan B then?
I can create it again if you want to give me a second.
If you can do, yeah, I tell you what, we'll do it on the slide and people can pop some answers in the chat for me. We'll do it like that, Joe. It'll be fine. Okay. So question 1 then is, how much do you think mental ill health costs UK employers every year? So if you can pop some answers in the chat, what are your thoughts on this? 3 billion? Let's start big, Ian. Any other thoughts? 4 billion, 5 billion, 120 billion. We kind of had a sudden rise, Vivian. Well done. 1.75 billion, 25. Give me one more and then I'll put the answers up. 55 billion. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so actually, Helen, you did really well. You get a prize. If I could give you a prize, Helen, you could have it right now. So actually the answer is 56 billion. It's kind of interesting just to see what that's made up of, actually. So the annual cost of presenteeism is about 28 billion. So that's people kind of struggling on and trying to kind of just get on with things. Turnover, approximately 22 billion. Annual cost of absenteeism, 6 billion. Okay, that is a chunk of money we're talking about here. So let's do question 2. So question 2 is a percentage, just to give you a heads up. So how much has the total cost of mental ill health increased to by employers since 2019? Again, just pop some things. Oh, hello, I can see a...
It's not allowing me. I'm just doing it again, Helen. I don't know why it's not allowing me to do it. Just bear with me.
Don't worry, we can do it in the chat, Joe. It's all good. So I've got 70, 60, 55. These are big numbers. 80. Oh, Hannah, you're absolutely on the money. It's 25%. Okay. I think the significance of the 2019 is, of course, it's the pandemic. And I think in the pandemic, I was looking at some graphs from the Office of National Statistics at the weekend, because that's how I like to spend my weekends. And one of the things I noticed was that there is a very clear rise in the pandemic, which has never really come down. And I think there's lots of reasons. I was on a webinar with James Carrier from World of Work just before Christmas, and he talked about the word of the year for 2022 was permacrisis. That's something to make us very cheerful. But the idea there is so much going on in the world, and maybe we've not fully started to really explore the after effects of the pandemic as well. Okay, so this one then. 55% of respondents in the CIPD Good Work Index, and can I point you in that direction? It's a very interesting read about where work is at the moment, had experienced depression in the past 6 months and said work had contributed. So how many of those, and it's percentage again, had discussed it with their boss or employer? Again, so if you want to pop some answers in the chat to me, that would be great. 25, 20, oh, you're going a bit quick there. You can't slow it down though. I kind of accept that. That's fine. Okay, 20%, 27, 5%. It's actually 36%. Had discussed it with their employees. There was a stat which was in the 2016 CIPD survey, which talked about something like 1 in 4 people would not talk to their managers regarding a mental health issue. And it kind of feels like that's not really moved on, even though it is much more commonly talked about now. So those 3 stats, one's come from the CIPD Good Work Survey, which is referenced at the end of the presentation, and then the other 2 have come from the Mental Health First Aid website, which is also referenced at the end of the presentation as well. I do like an extra reference at the end. Okay, so some stats to get us started. And then I wanted to just think about, so if I asked you to Google right now, but I don't want you to because I'd really like you to be here, and put the words mental ill health into Google and ask for an image, this is typically the kind of image that we'll get. Yes, Susie, I think Joey's going to share the slides after. So this is the kind of typical image that you would normally get. But actually, that's not the whole story. And one of the things I want to signpost you to is the This Is Me campaign. So this was done by Barclays, and in the references at the end, I've also highlighted a video for you. And it's really, you're not always seeing, it's not always presenting it in this way. So for example, this is Peter Toll, who is investment bank managing director, who would sneak out pretending he was going to lunch or had a meeting, but was really going to therapy and was hiding it. And if we think about that, masking it and hiding it, and the impact of that is it kind of takes up so much emotional energy that it leaves people pretty exhausted in a place where they might be pretty exhausted anyway. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of stuff going on there. And then I just captured an excerpt from the video, which just kind of encapsulates, you know, what we're talking about here. So I'm a mother, a sister, a very loyal friend. I suffer from depression and have done for nearly 20 years. But I also like to sing, to dance, and to go and see musicals. And I think sometimes the stereotypical image that we have isn't that those things might fit together. Yeah. So I strongly urge you to go and watch that video and share it with as many people as possible, because I think it really highlights the image and the masking that can take place. So we called this session Mental Health in the Current Climate. And I said at the top end, I think there is something going on in the world at the moment. I mentioned the word permacrisis. So let's go back into Amenti. And what I'd like to know from you is what is it about right now that is happening in the world? I don't know where I want to go any bigger than the world, the universe, that's quite big, isn't it? But what is happening in the world right now that is impacting on mental health? So what are your thoughts? Yep, cost of living, definitely. Climate change. You can do it in the Menti or the chat, either is fine. Strikes, Ukraine, war. Uncertainty in big letters, Lynn, thank you. Yeah, cost of living, burnout, cost of living, strike, politics. How many prime ministers did we have at the end of last year? Was it four at the end of last year? It's all right, Lynn, I'm good with caps. It's all good. Yeah. Work-life balance. Yeah. Political inconsistencies, work pressures, workloads, supporting others. Go on, keep going so I can have another sip of my tea. Best of education on our kids. There's a lot. I'm going to show you some headlines in a second, Susie, and there's a lot of discussion about that very thing at the moment, but also, you know, how the post-pandemic is affecting young people, particularly. Okay, so let's have a look then at some headlines that I correlated this year in terms of what's going on in the world at the moment. If I just go back over here, that will just flick it back on. Okay, so I'll just let these kind of dive in and let's just have a think about them. Okay, so there's a few things to kind of think about here. So cost of living, we absolutely got to there. There's also in the NHS a kind of shortage of services, which is when you've got rising mental health issues and then a shortage of services, those kind of things are kind of coming together. Then you've got the 0-hour contracts I've got there. I didn't put strikes in, but strikes is incredibly prevalent right now. The rise in the number of children needing help for serious mental health problems, young people fearing they'll never have enough money to be able to have kids, and people cutting back on seeing friends and hobbies due to money fears. And there's some research I'm going to show you in a second, which talks about actually loneliness. It can be one of the biggest drivers of anxiety, and one of the biggest things you can kind of do to improve is connect, which, oh bless you, which is kind of easier than it sounds. So let's have a look at some other stats then to consider. Yeah, Melanie, services are under immense strain at the moment. I think, you know, I picked one particular NHS district actually when I did that. Not socialising the fear of bugs, yes. I don't think COVID has gone completely away, but also there was the sort of cough kind of, do you call it an epidemic or a pandemic? But there was that cough that definitely was hanging around sort of December, Christmas time. So just some other things that came out in the research. This is all from the further reading that's at the back of the presentation. So 3/4 of people who are getting divorced feel less efficient at work. So anything that is a major life event is going to do that. The loneliness and the poor social connections are as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 75% said they felt stressed at work. 5 million people approaching the retirement age do not have an adequate retirement income, and 1 in 6 have no pension plan. It's really interesting if you kind of put that aside, the findings at the moment where there's a lot of there is a lot of the over 50s actually leaving the workplace. Oh, Susie, you're after my own heart with mentioning the menopause. We've been doing a lot of work here at the menopause at the moment. And yeah, that just kind of, you know, adds to all that. There's also this one about a level of anger. And I don't know how how that's manifesting itself in your workplaces. But this is a really interesting, this comes from the Good Work survey actually. There is a level of anger and a sense of fight. It feels like people's ability to come together, work together and compromise has been lost. It is more adversarial. And, you know, the quote was, have people forgotten how to behave in the workplace? Which is kind of an interesting thought. And actually for a lot of people who were either furloughed or working from home in the pandemic, you know, perhaps having come back to the workplace, you know, it's a very different way. For a start, I have to get fully dressed to come to work in the workplace. After nearly 3 years of disruption and uncertainty, there's no shortage of little burnouts. And burnout is different for absolutely everybody. And there's little burnouts. I might be exhibiting some of the signs, but not all of the signs, but I just carry on. And that's probably where we get into some of that presenteeism figures from earlier. So a couple of other things I just wanted to show you, and not to preempt Marion, who's going to be doing a session on this for HR Recruit in a few weeks. But the CIPD Financial Wellbeing Survey, I don't think it's going to be a shocker to everybody what the top is there. What is the current risk to the financial wellbeing of the workforce? You know, it's energy prices, consumer inflation, rent, sorry. But then at number 4, I think that's quite an interesting one, which is the lack of financial literacy. So, you know, if people aren't financially literate, then everything becomes a bigger problem. Yeah, for example. I do enjoy the one that's at the bottom of this, actually, buying or investing in cryptocurrencies. I don't know about you, but I'm not doing much of that at the moment. And then there was just one more, and this struck me on my, I still remained on Twitter, and this just struck me when I scrolled through it, you know, and there are a lot of carers in the workforce. So, you know, just thinking about what does a carer think about at work? So, you know, all these questions, are they okay without me? Have they eaten? Should I check up on them? What do I need them to do later? Have I hurt themselves? How can I leave them? Are they scared? How do I manage it? Are they safe? When will they eat or sleep? And I think that it's just a really interesting insight into what's going through a carer's mind. So I started off by saying, you know, some of this is about how we have this conversation. And Susie's mentioned menopause, and, you know, as I said, we've been talking a lot here recently about how do you have that conversation with your manager? And I think this is the same kind of area. How do I have this conversation? But also, how do I have that conversation if I'm the manager with that person? So let's kind of talk about how we might go about this. So, you know, that first bit, you know, is how are you? So are you okay? Are you okay really? You know, is a good source of reference for this. And really what I would say to you is, you know, make sure we really attentively listen. So Julie Starr, when she talks about her 4 levels of listening, talks about deep listening, that 4th one. And I think this is really what's required in this situation. So when she talks about deep listening, she's talking about listening, which is listening to what is said, but also unsaid. Yeah, so what she's talking about there is the dissonance between what is being said and the body language, you know, and picking up on some of that, you know, that I can't help but notice conversation. So when we talk about mental health, and I was certainly thinking on my way here this morning actually to work, that this certainly applies in the sort of menopause arena as well. But we talk about in mental health, definitely the ALGEE model. So first of all, you know, thinking about the approach and assess. So approaching the individual, having an open conversation in a safe and appropriate place. So if you're wanting someone to open up, it's not the best place to do it in the middle of the canteen or a coffee shop, or, you know, find somewhere that is really suitable for that person. I've been doing a lot of absence training recently, and I've been talking a lot about, I used to have a lady who I used to do a welfare meeting with in the John Lewis Cafe, and that was her choice. That's what she wanted. And I'm still, you know, wondering whether she just liked the cake rather than coming to see me, but there we are. But safe and appropriate place. Really think about the situation. Do you need some support? So depending on what you have in your organisation, that might be a mental health first aider. And just thinking about your own safety first. So is that person liable to get angry or violent? So just really, take a bit of a measure. Then listen. We've talked about this deep listening that Julie Starr talks about. Give them the space and the time to talk. So that might mean you might need to leave a bit of silence. Okay. So a top tip, if you are going to leave a bit of silence, is take a drink with you, take a bottle of water, something that you can do, because that's what I do when you do a Menti essentially, but something that you can do so you don't feel awkward during that moment. Okay. The other thing here is, it's really important to keep an open mind. Sometimes people will start to talk about things that will, that kind of, it resonates with you. And so, it's not about you, it's about the other person. Also, sometimes what we want to do is share our experiences. We want to say, oh, well, when I had that, but actually, sometimes that's not always useful because your experience is not that person's experience. Yeah. Give support. So, when we're talking about support, we talk about treat them with respect. Obviously, we're not going to post it on the internet, Twitter, or any of the other dark places of the web. It's not about blame. This is all about moving forward. It doesn't matter how it happened, how we came here. It's about, right, okay, what can we do to help? Yeah, and then encourage appropriate help. So you will have things in your business, and we'll talk about those a bit later. But it can be mental health first aiders, can be wellbeing champions. Sometimes it can be just about talking just to a trusted person. That Gallup question in the engagement survey, which is, do you have a friend at work? The reason that question is in there is because actually we all need a friend at work. We all need a place where we can kind of go to and say, have I got this right? Is there something going on there? And then encourage other support. So that can be family, friends, Mind Samaritans, and your employee assistance program. So I've given you some starters for 10 about what you could do to kind of support. So what we're going to do is I'd like you to think of some areas of support, and I want you to put it in the chat, but I don't want you to press enter. This is really important. Okay. So let me give you a minute. So you can just type it in, but don't press the buttons to kind of release it. But what other areas of support could you do? So I'll just give you a minute. Just type it in, no pressing enter, if that's okay. You notice that I use that silence to have a drink of tea. See, I'm role modeling all the way there for you. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, we're all going to press enter together, and hopefully the chat should go a little bit wild at this point, she says. Okay, so if I said 1, 2, 3, and you can press enter now, what happens? Lovely, thank you. Okay, oh, some interesting things in there. So I've just come over here and flip through the chat. Oh, we've got wellness action plans. Oh, I love the sound of a wellness action plan. Safe spaces so people can take breaks, diaries, adjustment passports. Oh, Caroline, could you tell me a bit more about what an adjustment passport is? I'm just interested. I've not come across that. You can either come off mute or tell me in the chat. I don't mind.
I'll send you a message in the chat.
Thank you, Caroline. That would be great. Individual coaching. Yeah, love that from Susie. Oops, what I'm trying to do there. Thrive Wellbeing Group. So I used to work in an organisation that had an online wellbeing group, and they used to meet. And there'd be a mental health first aider. I would facilitate that session, but it was actually an opportunity for people to talk about what they were going through. Because sometimes the feeling of I am completely on my own can feel quite difficult. I think Caroline might have told me what. Yeah, EAP wellness plans. There's quite a big range of stuff that we can showcase and we can support people with. And I think I know Emily and I feels like we have this conversation a lot, and I talk about mental health, and I will say, if it is, thank you, Caroline. I'll come back to my point with Emily in a second. It's a plan you work with your manager, maybe working from home, blocking periods. In fact, lovely. Thank you, Caroline. I have learnt. But when I talk about mental ill health, one of the things I talk about is, if I was coming to my manager and I was saying I've got a problem with time management, it's a fix almost. There is a discussion, and you can perhaps take some work off me, or we can talk about perhaps doing things at a later date. Whereas with something like mental ill health, that feels a bit harder. You can't suddenly take from my depression perhaps from me. You can't take my anxiety from me. It becomes what can I do to support? And a lot of what you can do is more about signposting than it is about actual fix. Hello, Claire. So we recently ran a town hall focused on mental health where members told their own stories. It was so helpful for creating an open culture of sharing. Absolutely. One organisation I've worked in, we used to do something which was called a bigger conversation, and we pick a particular topic. So we might do diversity, we might do mental health, and we did exactly what you're talking about there, Claire. And it's creating the mechanism for people to talk about it is really important. The more we talk about it, the more it becomes normal. And I would say to you that, if you look at the journey that mental ill health has come on, it's certainly more prevalent. We talk about it a lot more than we ever have done. So yeah, create a space for people to talk about it. There's some brilliant suggestions there. Thank you. And just some, suggestions for sources of support. So, if you've got an intranet or a wellbeing hub, you might have a reward provider who provides things like that. And it can be, the little things. So, it can be, I've worked on intranets where we've provided information on gardening, or we've provided recipes, or whatever it is. There is a whole host of things, employee assistance program, absolutely. Mental health first aiders, in the business. And one thing I just want to say about mental health first aiders particularly is just making sure that they have somewhere to kind of offload as well. I think it's really important for mental health first aiders to have some supervision so that they can kind of offload, so they don't kind of absorb all this stuff. Wellbeing champions. And definitely look at what you can provide inside your organisation. There's lots of organisations now providing free webinars. So things like the money webinars from Barclays, mine do a lot of free webinars as well that you can get people on. So, utilise some of that stuff. And then outside the organisation, you've got some, Mind is particularly good, not only for the free webinars, but, if somebody wants to kind of look at, the different types of mental health and what they might be. Yeah, equality network groups, mental health and wellbeing groups. Yeah, love that as well. The Samaritans, Step Change, debt charity, particularly in these times when we're talking about cost of living, financial wellbeing. There are specific financial organisations as well now. So Octopus Money Coaching, for example, are through there. Rethink Mental Illness, always the GP. As a signpost, and even just talking about it to family and friends, because what can happen is individuals may not even have had the opportunity to kind of talk to people in their family and friendship group, and that's always a good signpost to do that. And it could be that person is masking both inside the organisation and outside the organisation, and again, that is a lot of things that have been going on for them. So there's some sources of support, but then I just wanted to flip it over. And we've talked about some of the groups and some of the things that you have in your organisation, but I'd be really interested, what do you think you could do personally to promote wellbeing at work? So again, this is another, pop it in the chat for me. So this is you personally, that's for the organisation. What do you think you could do? And just while you're doing that, I once worked somewhere where at Easter, we gave everybody some vitamin C in an orange. That's a starter for 10. That's what I've got for you. I really like yours, Susie. Be vulnerable and share. Yeah. Lead by example. Some groups promoting wellness, having an open door policy, sharing our own experiences, I think is really valuable, because then people know it's okay. Wellbeing drop-in sessions. Creating a culture where people feel confident to speak out. Some mindful exercises in the workplace. I love the lunch and learns about doing different things. So whether it's a yoga session or Pilates, whether it's hypnosis, but just and helping people, because what that does, it gives people the opportunity to try something that perhaps is out of their comfort zone, but in a very safe space. Yeah, promote mental health champions, first aiders. Yeah, make time for my own well-being, Claire, and role model this. Yeah, and whatever that looks like. So no sending emails at 2 a.m. in the morning, for example, unless that's your normal working hours. And more often than not now, what we're seeing is that little paragraph at the bottom of people's emails is, I am sending this email at a time which is convenient for me. Please do not feel as though you have to respond in this moment. Yeah, quarterly team lunches, encouraging people to use the gym. Yeah, if you've got it. And be mindful that not everything works for everybody. That's the thing. Yeah. Oh, Liz, I love that. You're developing a program to help managers be confident in that discussion. Yeah, team building. So let's have a look at some of those things that I came up with. So signposting existing wellbeing resources, allowing people to bring their whole selves to work. Yeah, one of the things I talk about a lot is inclusiveness. So if people aren't always the life and soul of the party, that's okay. They don't have to be. There's a stat I showed a couple of weeks ago, which was something like 80% of organisations are set up for extroverts, but actually that's not the case. The reality of the situation. Communicate more than you think you need to. I think communication is that one thing that you can always do. Set clear expectations about workloads. I would also say I would encourage people to be really good at asking questions about workloads. Can they really do it? What does that look like? If you've ever had the unfortunateness to work with me, that's not a real word, I know. I ask a lot of questions before you give me something to do, so I'm really clear about what it is. Listen to people non-judgmentally. It's quite easy for us to launch into, oh, I know where this is going. I'm just going to speak to them. Be vulnerable, which I think is what Susie had in the chat. Model healthy behaviours, whether that's about time, whether it's about moving away from your desk, maybe it's about going having a walk around the office, whatever it is. Encouraging staff to eat healthily at work. That could be, the sort of snacks you provide in your team meetings or your training, for example. Encouraging staff to set up WhatsApp groups around common interests, whatever they are, and using check-ins at the start of the meeting. So where I used to work before strategy, one of the things we did, that at the start of every meeting you went to, there would be some kind of check-in, which was, it was always about, tell us how you're feeling at the moment. And it could be a picture or a word. And we used to do it in a variety of ways. But it started, what that enabled us to do was it was quite a difficult organisation to work in for a number of reasons. But what that enabled us to do was to start to have that discussion about, I'm not feeling great at the moment, and to kind of share that. And that kind of brings us to the end of what I wanted to talk about. There is a host of things that I've looked at here, and this is the best of those that I would definitely recommend. And I know that, of course, Joe is going to share the slides. And then just one more thing, and just to say, if you wanted to come and see us in person or virtually, we are around. We're doing some sessions for the Staff Chamber of Commerce, but we're also going to be virtually. We're going to be talking about menopause in April. And the other thing I feel duty bound to point out is that our CEO Wendy is doing a session on why women don't play golf, which is all about women in leadership. So just to finish it off, and just I'd be really interested to know from you what you're going to take away and use from this session. Is there anything that's kind of got you thinking, has got you started? So if I can give you a minute just to do that, and I've probably still got some tea left. I do. I have a whole third of my cup of tea left to drink. So I'm just interested to know what you're going to take away and use, and whether you're going to use some of the resources. Yeah, me too, Caroline. It makes sense. I like a model that makes sense. Yeah. Any others? Okay, so we're loving the ALGEE model, which is all good. Okay, different ways to support people. Yeah. Further reading. And I think what you find is, I think once you get into this topic, the reading kind of then lends itself and takes you somewhere else. So, actually, I was really conscious that Marion's doing the session on financial well-being in a couple of weeks. So, but I was just kind of drawn to that particular graph. Yeah. Encouraging people to have healthy food. It can be things like recipe sharing. I'm not the one to be doing this. I've got to be really honest. I'm a rubbish cook. I'm definitely a person who takes things out of a packet and puts it in the oven. Yeah, using different approaches to develop psychological safety. Yeah. More open wellbeing forums. Best practice behaviours. Simple things like having a conversation, having a drink, starting a meeting with a check-in. Any more? Yeah, more of a validation. And I think sometimes there is a kind of confidence, are we doing the right thing? Is this the things we should be doing and getting started with? And I think if that's what you've taken from the session, that's great, and promote what's available. Sometimes you kind of, just having leaflets and having things on hand to kind of access is really useful. And I'm going to hand back to Jo and just say, thank you very much for coming and listening to what we've got to say on the topic. And if you've got any questions, then feel free and we will do our best using the email statement. Sorry, Jo, I'll stop talking.
No, don't worry. Thank you very much. It's been a really good session. There's been some amazing resources there. I'm sure that people are going to take quite a lot away from it. So thanks very much for all your efforts there. So just to sort of finish up, our next boardroom is actually in 2 days' time on Thursday, and it's called Getting Redundancy Right, and is being facilitated by Nathan Andrews. I will send out some correspondence this afternoon to the people who have signed up for the event, and I put a post on LinkedIn, so you can put a comment in LinkedIn if you want a copy of the slides and or the recording. We've also got a Guild networking group for HR professionals. I know that some of you are already members of that, but if the others of you aren't and want to sign up, then please feel free to sign up. It's a bit like a networking group for HR professionals, and we've got over 1,000 people registered in that now. If anyone is recruiting, we've also got accountancy recruit and FD recruit within the group. But finally, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Helen and to Emily for the time and effort in putting the session together. And also thanks very much to everybody for signing in. Thank you.